Okay, my name is Kimberly Collins, and today I'm going to be giving you a very, very basic introduction to joins in SQL. So first off, who I am. I've been a SQL database developer for 12 years. I'm currently freelancing. I'm a co-organizer of the OKC SQL user group and a few other groups, so I really enjoy SQL. Talking about why we need joins. The idea comes from database normalization. I did a talk on this a while back. I can give you all the link. The idea of separating data into different tables to optimize it for efficiency in storage, but not for human readability. So part of that is representing each entity with an ID, which is generally going to be meaningless to the user. So this is normalization, and the idea of joins is basically unnormalizing that data. So if you want to learn more about database design and normalization, check out this talk that I gave last year, I think, and that I hope will explain more about why we do that and how that works. But the idea of joining is to, like I said, unnormalize that data. We're making the data human readable again. So normalizing makes it more efficient for the computer, but joins make the data more readable for humans. And if we want to use data from multiple tables, we need to join them together. So if you're wanting to get started with this, the first thing you'll need to do is install SQL Server Management Studio or some other querying tool. And then the database I'm using in my demos, and a good one to use to practice, is called AdventureWorks. You can get that from Microsoft. So some types of joins. The first one, and I think the easiest to understand, is the cross join, but it's one that we rarely use. It's where we take all the possible combinations of rows between two different tables. So if the first table has 2 rows, and the other table has 3 rows, cross join gives us 6 rows because we have the first row from the first table and all 3 from the second. And then we have the second row from the first table and all 3 from the second. And if you're thinking, why would you ever want to do this? Well, you're kind of right. We rarely do this. You'll use it when you get a little bit more advanced in SQL to generate test data. And I've used it a couple of times in my career for reports. But past that, a lot of people think that this is the most basic, this is the most common, and it's not at all. So if you're finding yourself wanting to use this, you're probably not doing it right. There's another join that's much better. So cross join kind of, I think, explains the idea of what it means to join tables together. And once you get that idea, you can move on to other types of joins. But do keep in mind that we are very rarely going to be using this in the real world. So an example, in this database I have, there's a department table. So all the departments in the company, there are 16 of them. There's a row for each department. There's also a shift table. I think the shifts are day, evening, and night. So those are the 3 shifts. If we wanted to see all 48 different combinations of those, we would use a cross join. So let me switch over to SQL Server and show you that. So if I select star, which means everything, from the department table, we'll see our 16 departments: engineering, sales, etc. And if you want to see the shifts, day, evening, and night, and if for some reason, maybe for a report, you wanted to see those 48 combinations, we would have the first department, day, evening, night, second department, day, evening, night, third department, day, evening, night. And if you're thinking, why would this ever be useful? It's not super useful. The thing we could add to this to make it a little bit more useful would be like if we wanted to see the number of employees in that department on that shift. Sometimes it's going to be 0, because probably engineering doesn't work during the night, or sales, or most of these. But we wanted to see all the different combinations. That's how we would get it through a cross join. There's another syntax that is kind of an old style. I see it every once in a while, and I want to show you just so you are familiar with it, but please don't ever use it. It's not readable. It's not a standard practice at all. The way you do that is you have your first table, human resources department. I'm giving it a nickname, an alias of D, a comma, which is like this tiny little character that you can miss very easily, and that's why this is such bad practice, is you might not see that. And then our second table is human resources shift, and I'm giving that the alias of S. So I'm selecting from these 2 tables, and the 2 things that I want to bring out from those tables, there are a lot of other columns too, but the ones I care about are the name of the department. So department I'm calling D, d.name, name is the name of the column, and then s.name is the name of the shift. And I don't want to just see name and name. I want to give those my own aliases. Department name is this first column, name of the department, and then shift name, just so I can easily see the names of these things. So this is something you can do, and it works, but I would really recommend that you not use it. The better way to do a cross join is with the word cross join. We're making it really clear what we're doing here. We're still selecting from the first column, Human Resources Department, calling it D. The second table is shift, calling it S, and then this logic is the same. So that is a cross join. Pretty rare to use this in a real query. I've come across it maybe once a year in like real code. It's rare. So that's cross join. The next type that's much more common is inner join. That's when we are wanting to match up the rows, but use some criteria to put them together. We're not just matching every row with every row. We're saying, something has to be true about these two rows. One gotcha, or two gotchas really, is that you would do that to limit your results, and you might not realize you're limiting your results, so be careful with that. And you can also introduce duplicates, which you might not realize that you're doing. So be careful that those two things can happen, either getting fewer results than you expected or more because of duplicates. You can also see just join for this one, but I'd really recommend that you use inner join, again, to make it a little bit more clear what's going on. So the way this usually works is that there's one or more columns that exist in both of the tables, and we're joining on. And the word on is pretty important here. It's the way we're connecting the two tables together. Lots of times that will be the primary key in one table. So department's primary key is department ID. That's the way we reference that department in other tables. So another table might have department ID as a foreign key, meaning that it points back to the first table. So that's the way the inner joins often work, but you can use lots of other criteria. So an example, there's a product subcategory. So a lot of the products are assigned to this subcategory, which belongs to a category. And so the column in the product subcategory table is an ID, which means nothing to us. We want to see that name of the category for the subcategory. So I'll switch back over to Management Studio and show you the inner join examples that I have. So just to show you what I mean, this is the list of subcategories, mountain bikes, road bikes, whatever. And then the category ID, I hope you can see it here well enough. 1, 2, 3, that means nothing to us. We have no idea what those numbers mean. So if you look at the product category table, you can see, okay, 1 is bikes, 2 is components, etc. So if I want to show a list of product subcategories, I will show the subcategory name. But I want to show not the ID that's in the table for the category. I want to see the name of the category. So I'm going to inner join that product subcategory to the product category on the product category ID. And so this is a typical setup where product category ID is the primary key of product category. It's what we use to identify each product category distinctly. And then product category ID is a foreign key in the product subcategory table, meaning that it points back to the product category. So if I show you here, we have not mountain bikes 1, but mountain bikes bike, handlebars, components instead of 2, etc. So this is a pretty standard format for inner joins. So left outer join is the next type that's very common. Inner join is probably the most common that I see, but left outer join is very common too. That's when we want to see all the rows in the first table, even if they don't have a match in the second table. So inner join requires there to be a match, but left outer join does not. And again, this can introduce duplicates if you're not careful, so just be aware of that. And the word outer is optional. I've gotten into a habit where I usually just type left join. It's a little bit clearer, maybe, if you put the word outer in there. You can choose, be consistent, do what your team does, but past that, I don't have a strong preference. One way we use the left outer join is with a where clause. So not just showing all the records in the first table, but just limiting to those that have a match in the second table. This is a pretty common use of left join. And if that doesn't make a ton of sense, I can go over that in more detail later. That's kind of a maybe slightly more advanced use case. So an example of when I would use left outer join is when I want to show the subcategory for each product if it has one. Not every product has a subcategory. So back on my examples of left outer join, these are the products and the subcategories. So some of these, like the logo cap, has a subcategory of caps, but the bearing ball has no subcategory. So we'll just show null, which means nothing. So this is my syntax again, almost identical to the inner join, except this one says left outer. We have our first table, production products. I'm calling it P. I'm left outer joining to production product subcategory. I'm calling that PSC. And these are names that I can some people use A, B, C, D. I like to use letters that stand for the name of the table. And then we're joining on the product, subcategory ID, in both of the tables. This doesn't have to be the same column name, but it often will be. So these are the results that we're seeing here. Sometimes there is a subcategory name, and sometimes there isn't. If I only wanted to see the products that had subcategories, I'd use an inner join. So that's the difference between inner join and left outer join. Another example is where I want to see all the products that have never been sold. So back to SQL Server Management Studio, I am selecting the products. So from production products, calling it P. Sales order detail is where they're keeping track of every time a product is sold. So the product ID in the product table joins to the product ID in the sales order detail table, SOD. But I only want the results where there is no sales order product ID with that given ID. So this will show me all the products that have never been sold, or at least not yet. I'm showing the product number and the name. I'm not using any columns from the sales order detail table because they would just be null for everything. There's no reason to show that. But this can be really useful to show all the records that exist in one table but not another. Right outer join is analogous to left outer join. I'm not saying it's never been used in the world. It's just I have personally never used it, and I don't think I've ever seen anyone else use it. So just strike this from the list of things that you feel like you need to learn because you don't. Full outer join is maybe not as common, but it can be really useful for reports. It's when we want to see all the rows from both of the tables we're joining, even if they don't have a match in the other table. And again, the word outer is optional, so I usually just call it full join. Like I said, I use them mostly for reports where I'm comparing two things, like the customer wants to see the expenses by category and compare January and February. Well, I want to see this category if it had an expense in either month. An inner join would only give me the result if it was in both months. Left join would only give me the result if it was in January. But I want to see even if the expenses don't have any results for January or February. I want to see both. Another example that might be clear, I hope, salespeople can be assigned to sales territories in this database. So if I just wanted to see the list of salespeople assigned to territories, I would use an inner join. But maybe the customer says that on this report they would also like to see any salespeople who don't have a territory, and they want to see territories that don't have any salespeople. So if we just wanted to see salespeople in territories, that would be an inner join. If we wanted to include the salespeople that don't have territories, that would be a left join. But now we want the records that are in both tables, whether they have a match or not. We want to include those territories that don't have any salespeople. That's what makes it a full join. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense. I can go through this more after the stream, after the talk, and go through some examples. This one is a little bit more advanced, a little bit confusing, but that'll give you an idea of when you would use a full join. So the results of this query, Jillian Carson is assigned to the Central Territory, Linda Mitchell is assigned to the Southwest Territory, and a bunch of other people have territories too, but you get the idea. Those first two records are what we would get from an inner join. Rachel Valdez, if she doesn't have a territory and we want to include her, we would use a left join. But then we realize that territories like Alaska don't have any salespeople, and we want to see that on this report, so that's why we need to use a full join. We see the records in both tables, whether they have matches in the other table or not. So go through those types of joins. We had inner join, left outer join, which are very common. Cross join and full join, not as common. I would say probably full join is more common than cross join. And then right outer join, like I said, you don't need to do that. Just use a left join. So if you want to learn more about this, I've got my slides and my demos on GitHub under K.A. Collins. You can find a sample database like the one I'm using called AdventureWorks. If you want to learn more about SQL, come to our meetup group for OKC SQL on the third Monday of the month. If you have any questions, I can take them now, or you can ask them in Slack. You can message me, Kimberly Collins, or ask in the databases or OKC SQL channels. If you're not in Slack already, I'd really recommend that. You can sign up at slack.techlahoma.org. So any questions now about these different types of joins? Why you would use them? You want to see the examples?
So in your example of the full, well, really my question is about the left join. But that, like, what is on the left is going to vary based on how you write the query. Is that right?
Yes. So the question is, what we mean by left depends on how you write the query, and that's why I'm saying don't worry about right outer join, because you can just rewrite your query in a way that makes more sense. So if I go back and look at the left outer join example, what we mean by left it's not super clear that this is left and this is right. So left is the first thing and right is the second thing. If I rewrote this in the other order, but I still wanted the same results, I would use right outer join, but we just don't do that. We write them in this order of like the thing that comes first is left and the second thing is the right. And if you want everything from this first table, regardless of whether it has a match in the second table, we're gonna write it like this and call it a left outer join. Any other questions about these examples or joins in general? A great way to ask me is in Slack, or I can stick around afterwards and show you more examples, because some of these are a little bit more advanced, but I wanted to keep it as basic as possible, just the basic idea of what these joins are. Okay.